Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here with us this morning. Church on the Hill, visitors, everybody online. We're grateful you're here with us today. I'm Casey Carrasco. I am one of our board members here at the church, which is scary. They let me make decisions, but they do. For some reason, I don't know. Luckily, my wife trusts me today, so we didn't have to worry about those decisions. And I also help serve in the kids ministry. I love working with kids. Most of the time, I'm a 10-year-old trapped in a 43-year-old's body, so it's like playtime with my friends over there. And then I also help lead our greeting ministry around here, and I say all that not to brag, but I say that because I do all these things because I love this church. You guys are great, and it's an honor to serve you guys and to be here and to love you guys with my service and to be able to honor God with that. Yeah, so that's something that I am grateful for, to be able to do that. And one of the other things that I get to do from time to time is I get to come up here and preach the word. I know what you guys are thinking, though. I usually only preach once a year, right around the time kids go to summer camp, and that was like a month ago. And I'm back up here, and you guys are like, don't we get a year break in between these guys' sermons? You know, now you know how my wife feels when she has to wake up next to me every day. So there you go. Exactly. Thank you, Reggie. But in all seriousness, Jason came to me a couple weeks ago, and he has a really great opportunity. His nephew plays for Oregon State University football, and they're down here at San Diego State, and they got to play here in San Diego. So Jay took his family. They went down there, got to see his nephew play live, and then they got to take the day off and celebrate one of their daughter's birthdays. I can't remember which one off the top of my head right now, but they did get to celebrate that today. So Jay just got a great weekend being able to come and be with his family, relax, recharge his batteries. And in case you didn't know, we have one of the hardest working senior pastors I've ever met. Jason gives 120% to everything he does, and we are so blessed and fortunate. So for me to be able to return the favor to him and give him a weekend off to recharge and come back to us fully powered to be able to lead us, it's my pleasure. And also, if there's any complaints, you can go and email those to pastorj@churchonthehill.com, okay? Well, we're coming to the end of this series that we've been in all summer called Major Lessons from Minor Prophets. And basically the idea behind this series is that we aren't going to go and dig real deep into these things because the minor prophets are so rich with prophecy and visions and all these things that we would have to spend an entire year probably breaking those down to do them pure justice of breaking down each verse in Scripture in that. So we're just doing a 30,000 view to give you an idea of what's going on in the minor prophets. And so when Jay asked me to preach, I asked him, okay, which one am I getting? And then he said, oh, you got Zechariah. And so if you open your bulletins, I made this little outline for you guys of everything going on in Zechariah, and I instantly panicked when I saw this. I'm like, okay, I don't know if you've ever seen these videos online, but if you stick Mentos in a Coke bottle, it like explodes. And I saw this video of a kid who took an entire package of Mentos, dropped them in a 2-liter bottle of Coke, and then stuck his mouth on it. And what happens next is, I'm not guaranteeing this, okay, I didn't have slow motion, but I think Coke came out his mouth, nose, ears, and eyes. It was just spraying everywhere, and it launched his head back, Coke goes spraying everywhere, and as I started digging in, trying to figure out what to preach on, I kind of felt that way about the Scriptures because there was so much here. The Scripture is so rich with visions and prophecies that I was like, God, what am I going to do? How am I going to narrow this down to a 3-hour sermon? Okay? So I hope you guys ate before you got here. If not, sneak out and grab a donut midway through here. We'll get through it. But in all seriousness, I did. I think I lost 3 or 4 hairs. I don't have much to lose and stressing over it. And I just did what I've been taught to do, which is to stop and pray. Meditate on the Word. And I prayed and I prayed. And I said, God, what am I supposed to do here? And a weird saying came to me. It's going to be kind of the title of our sermon. It says, miss the forest for the trees. And I'm sure you've probably heard this before. So I looked up the official dictionary version. I like to make stuff up, so I wanted to give you the truth here on this one here when it comes to statements like this. And basically what it says is, Merriam-Webster says, to not understand or appreciate a larger situation or problem, etc. Because one is considering only a few parts of it. And so as we're looking through Zechariah, there's a lot of trees. There's a lot of trees in the scripture, and I don't want to get singular focused on any one of them, but I want to see the forest that God has created with these scriptures, and hopefully see the big picture of what he's doing here today. And so just to give you a little context to what we're heading into, Zechariah, a lot of us aren't educated in the Old Testament or BC era stuff, and so right around 520 BC, the Israelites were getting released from exile. And so what happened is the Israelites were not being obedient to God, and God brought in people to come in and take them, tear down the temple, tear down their walls, and exile them to a foreign country, and they were living as prisoners under this other occupation. And at about 520, they were released to go and rebuild the temple. And when we jump into Zechariah here, we're looking at it right around 538, 540 BC, and Zechariah is coming to talk to them. And God's called him to talk to these exilees about things going on. And Pastor Jay talked last week, if you want to get in some fill into what we're talking about today, he taught on Haggai, who was coming as a prophet around the same time to talk to him about some of the same things. And one of the things that Jay had mentioned is they were sent back to build the temple, but about 20 years out of exile, they had kind of stopped building the temple. And they kind of got focused on building their houses and rebuilding their culture and rebuilding their people, and God wasn't happy about that. God was like, whoa, what's going on here? I'm going to send you a couple guys, and when the prophets come, you got to kind of think of it like it's one of those situations when mom says, wait till your father gets home. The prophets aren't bringing good news, okay? They're coming to bring the hard stuff. And so if the guys can put it up on the screen, can we get Zechariah 1, 2 through 6? We're going to be hopping through the scriptures here, so if you didn't wear running shoes, be careful. We're going to be running real fast, and I will do my best not to go too fast and make sure that we articulate everything going on here, because it's absolutely beautiful what we're going to see today. And so we're going to just start with verse 2, and it says, "The Lord was very angry with your ancestors." That is not a great conversation starter, okay? Come to find out, God was very angry. And so one thing that I think I want to give you context to the exiles about this time is most of the people coming out of exile had been there so long that most of them were born in exile. For them, normality and normal life was being in exile. They didn't remember the promised land. They never lived there. They never lived and had the opportunity to worship God at the temple. These people were born in exile. They had no idea what it meant to live in the promised land and under God's grace and God's mercy and God's blessing. And so they're coming back into this land, and for them, being in the promised land and being under God is like a foreign land to them. And so it's easy to be like, hey, why are you guys messing up? But what you have to understand is they're kind of like fish out of water right now. They're a little bit of fish out of water, and so God says, okay, we're going to nip this in the butt, and I'm going to come back around, and I'm going to say, guess what, guys? You remember how you lived over there before? That was because your ancestors messed up, and I had to punish them. I want you to remember that I was angry about something, and we need to head into that. And so in verse 3, if we can get that up there, it says, "Therefore, tell the people, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Return to me, declares the Lord Almighty, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty." God basically says, come back to me, and I will come to you. One of the things that we oftentimes don't take into account when we're understanding the Jewish thing is Jewish culture is that all the Jews were born into Judaism, right? It's not just a faith, it's a race. And so when these kids are born and raised, they're raised in this tradition. They're taught all these things. This is not just a religion, it's a way of life. And so they are raised up in this, and so this is what they understand life to be. But in this verse here, I think one of the beautiful things is God says, return to me. He's not saying, hey, why aren't you guys doing what I called you to do? Why aren't you being obedient followers of me? Why aren't you building my temple? These are what you're supposed to do. God's not chastising them over them not doing what they think they should be doing. He's calling them into relationship. And I think one of the first things I want us to kind of key in here is that something that Zechariah is painting is a different picture of how they view what it means to follow God, right? So I think for all these years, the Jews and the people are faithful to do their sacrifices to atone for their sin, and they're faithful to do their offerings of blessing to God and to honor God, and they're doing all these things, but this one sort of thing kind of continues to play out over time as we watch the Old Testament unfold. And my first pastor, Pastor Paul Cunningham, used to tell me this one thing, and it's stuck in my head. And he said that rules without relationship breeds rebellion. And that's great advice for parents. It's great advice for friendships, for anything, is that relationship is the key to being able to function healthily. And so basically, what unfolds over time with the Jews is they continually follow the rules of God because that's what they know they're supposed to do. That's what they're taught to do. And what ends up happening is their religion with God becomes an accountability-based thing. It becomes an accounting thing, and the relationship, the joy of loving their God is stripped away because, oh, well, if I sinned, I have to go to the temple now and I have to sacrifice. And in their minds, they failed to understand that God has always wanted to be in relationship with them, and they get caught up in having to be right with God. They lose track constantly of where they're supposed to be at. And so in the first layer of the picture God's laying is that I'm calling you into relationship with me. Come back to me. Be my people, and I will be your God. Verse 4, if we could put that up there, please. It says, do not be like your ancestors to whom the earlier prophets proclaimed. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Turn from your evil ways and your evil practices, but they would not listen or pay attention to me, declares the Lord. And can we go to 5, please? Where are your ancestors now and the prophets? Do they live forever? And then can we jump over to 6 and stay there? But did not my words and my decrees, which I commanded my servants, the prophets, overtake your ancestors? Then they, we're going to stop right there. Stop at the ancestors. Whoop, getting ahead of myself. It's kind of an interesting thing God's doing here. God's letting this new generation know that he's going to follow through with his word. He said, look at your ancestors. I warned them. They keep up acting like fools, and I'm going to exile them. I'm going to bring destruction upon you. You keep doing this, and I'm going to repay your evil with this. Be warned. This is what I do. This is what I do. And it's interesting that he goes into this next part where he asks, do they live forever? And I really sat stumped on that one for a little bit, just trying to pray through what God was going with. And I think the truth is nobody lives forever, right? Physically on this earth, right? If we know Jesus, when we die, we get to go to eternity with him. And if we don't know him, unfortunately, there's another eternity that is waiting for us. But nobody lives forever. But I think if you were to sit down and be honest with yourself, I didn't think today I might not be here tomorrow. That's not a thought that crossed my mind today. I thought, I get to go to church today. Tomorrow I get to go to work, and I get to go to work, and and then, what do I got? Maybe my father-in-law will call me to play pickleball on Tuesday. Maybe not. I don't know. I start planning my life before I've lived today. And I think what God is challenging these people is, I think the people thought, well, God's just mad at us. Eventually, we'll get our act together, right? We always think we have tomorrow to fix today's problems. We always think we have that time. And the story that came to my mind is, I haven't shared this with most of you guys here, but I was a child of an affair. My dad, when he met my mom, lied to her and told her that he was a single gentleman and that he was wanting to make a family with her. And so when she got pregnant, she found out that he was married and that he had another family. And so she said, divorce your wife and marry me and let's start a family, or hit rocks, buddy, and go back to your other family. Like, don't put us in the middle. And so my dad decided to go back to his other family. I'm not mad about that. And that's what he did. And so I grew up without my dad. The first day I met my dad was the day before my 18th birthday. It was the first time I met him in person, and it was a day full of tears and joy. But what progressed after that was, for my stepmom, she had nothing but bitterness towards me because all I was a reminder of when my father had cheated on her. And so she couldn't stand the sight of me. She would try a couple times to have me over, and then she'd tell my dad, it's just too hard to see him. It brings back all the memories of what had happened. And so what ended up happening is, over the next 23 years of my life, I got to spend maybe 1 or 2 days a year with my dad. And we had pretty much a texting conversation. And 2 years ago, just recently, we celebrated the anniversary of my dad's passing. My dad died. He had a breathing fit. Took his breathing medication, got lightheaded, fell over, hit his head, and that pressure from hitting his head ruptured his aorta, and he left this earth. And the craziest part about all this is my brother calls me, and he's like, Casey, I got to talk to you. So, man, what's up? 2 o'clock in the morning. Dad passed. And I'm like, oh, no. And I said, well, okay, talk to your mom and find out if it's okay if I come. Because she lost her husband. I lost my dad, but she lost her husband, and I wanted to have grace for her in that. And I said, if she's not comfortable with me being there, I won't come. But I'd love to. I'd love to say goodbye. And my brother said, no, Mom said come. My mom said come. And so I show up to the hospital. And the first person who greets me with the biggest hug is her. And she says, Casey, I'm so sorry. I robbed you of all these years with your father. I was selfish, and I was hurt, and I was unkind to you, and I am so sorry. You know, but she thought there was going to be a day that she was going to be okay. She kept waiting, and that day never came, and it was too late for us to be a family. And I think this is what God's telling the people. He's like, don't wait to do the right thing, to do what you're called to do. And so this is a saying that I strive to live by. And I feel like it's a good one, is do what you're called to do today and trust God for tomorrow, right? And the only reason I shared about the things that I do at this church is they were opportunities that I was asked to step up and do here. Pastor Jay came to me and said, hey, would you lead our welcome ministry? And I said, absolutely. You know, I can push some carts around and buy donuts. Boom, easy. And then he asked me to take on a board position, and I prayed about it, and I told God if there was anything that wasn't supposed to be about that please put the stop sign up in my life, and God didn't put a stop sign up, so I showed up and did that. And when I was asked to step in and help with kids ministry, I prayed to God. He didn't show me stop signs, and I stepped up and did that because as long as I'm alive, I'm going to do today what God has called me to do, and I'll let him worry about tomorrow. And so the great thing is, at the end of verse 6, they repented. Woohoo! The Lord Almighty has done to us what our ways and practices deserve, just as he determined to do. And so they said, hey, we realize our ancestors messed up. We don't want to be them. So we're going to make the right choice, and we're going to go to God. And that's what kind of leads us into this big bad boy here. We are not going to cover every point, like I said, but I wanted to give you guys at least a tool as we start digging into this. I can't take all the claim for this thing. I did my own, and then I bounced it against the ESV Study Bible and said, okay, I got to make a couple tweaks here, okay? And then I made a couple tweaks to some of the headings, so it's not exactly to the ESV Bible. And then Martha was nice and made it pretty for me because I'm a boy, and it just looked like on a page. Okay, but this will help you kind of work through the book of Zechariah and kind of have an understanding of what's going on. And so the first part that we're going to kind of tread through is these 8 visions that God gives to Zechariah about what's coming and what's going on to the people right now. And so he's working on revealing this to them through this section. And so if we can jump into Zechariah 2:3, we'll take our first pit stop here and see what's happening. And we're going to go all the way through 5, guys, so if you don't mind following with me. While the angel who was speaking to me was leaving, another angel came to meet him and said to him, run, tell that young man Jerusalem will be a city without walls because of the great number of people and animals in it. And I myself will be a wall of fire around it, declares the Lord, and I will be its glory within. Yep, perfect. So you want to talk about making somebody uncomfortable, tell somebody that they were slaves for a really long time, go back and build your homes, but don't throw up walls. But we were attacked, and people took advantage of us. Don't we need walls to protect ourselves, God? Don't we need walls? And God says, go tell them there's not going to be walls because I'm going to be the wall. I'm going to be a wall of fire around you. And I think this is going to be coming into a second layer that God's painting in this picture, is that he wanted the people to start thinking differently about how they viewed him and how they viewed their faith and what they believed about God. Because you see, they had walls. They had a temple. They had protection. They had armies. And guess what happened? They got exiled. Nothing stopped that from happening. So building walls, is that really going to keep you safe if you're disobedient to God? Walls aren't going to protect you. Now, God's not saying don't build walls. He's not saying don't build walls, but he wants them to start thinking differently, that if they're in obedience with who he is and who he's called them to be and in this relationship, then he's going to be the wall that protects them. He's going to be the one that stops them from being exiled, and he's the one who's going to protect them. To give you some other parts in the Bible where God basically was like a firewall of protection to kind of create this imagery and play this out a little bit. In Genesis 3:24, that's not going to be on the screen. You can write that down if you'd like to. Adam and Eve messed up, and guess what happened? They got the boot out of the Garden of Eden, which was plentiful. It was great. They had the tree of life in there, tree of knowledge of good and evil. They got to walk with God every day, and they messed up, and God gave them to boot. And what he put up was a flaming sword that was fearsome and basically protected from all sides what was going on. And as far as we know, according to the scriptures that we have, nobody has entered the Garden of Eden ever again. God's protection of that place has been absolute and sacred. The next one I want to talk about is in 2 Kings 6:17. This is one of the coolest stories in the Bible. One of the coolest stories in the Bible. There's a prophet named Elisha, and he has his servant, and they're in a house, and they're being pursued by an army. They walk outside of this house, and it's not going to be on the screen, sorry. That's 2 Kings 6:17. And Elisha's in this house with his servant, and they go outside, and there's an army. I don't know about you, but if I was up against an army with a servant, I'm going to lose that battle. I might go out in glory, but it's not going to go well. And the servant freaks out, and he says, Elisha, what are we going to do? And Elisha just puts his hand up and prays, and he says, Lord, open his eyes. And when the servant opens his eyes, the Lord's army of chariots of fire surrounded them and was there to protect them. You see, God is capable of doing the things we can't if we're willing to show up and do what we're supposed to do. And so as I'm talking about God starting something new, we see the same kind of thing happening in the New Testament for us and our new covenant here. And I want to touch base on Romans 8:37 through 39. It's not going to be in your bulletins, or not going to be on the board or anywhere. You can write that down if you'd like. And it says this: in all things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Powerful verse. Cling on to that. In the darkest days, hold on to that scripture. And remember, nothing can take you from God's hands. Not even the things you can't even see that are scary of this world can touch you. You say, Casey, how does this all come together? I'm going to get there. I promise. Well, you see, when we're looking back into the Old Testament, for the people who were exiled, that was their damnation. They were separated from the temple, ability to make sacrifices, ultimate separation from God on earth. You see, and sometimes we mix up heaven and hell a little bit from our movies and our TV shows. We think, oh, heaven's going to be a place I'm going to eat donuts every morning for breakfast and go play golf with my best friends, right? And then we think about hell, and it's like some people think, oh, hell's going to be where I'm going to kick back and party with my buddies, right? And they think about hell in all these different ways. But the true essence of heaven and hell is that heaven is ultimately being in God's presence all the time. And I don't fully understand that, but the part I do understand makes my head feel warm and fuzzy. Because there's going to be peace, joy. It's going to be blissful. But hell is ultimate exile from God. You won't be able to feel his presence. It'll be your worst day times 10 million, zillion, billion, as my nephew likes to say. And so the reason I bring in the scripture from Romans is for the Old Testament, for the exiles, them being exiled to a foreign country was their damnation. But for us, we either go to heaven or hell. And if we've given our lives and we've been obedient to go to God and he brings us and he comes to us, there's nothing that is going to stop you from going to heaven. You may lose your house. You may lose your kids. You may be beat up, broken, and destroyed. But the most important thing is locked in place, where you're going to be when these eyes close for the last time. Your eternity is locked in with God. Catch up. So that's our second layer. First layer, God initiates them into understanding that he wants relationship, not religion. And the second thing he says, trust in me and I will protect you. I'm going to protect you. And then if we can go to Zechariah, we're going to jump a few chapters now. We're going to go to Zechariah 15, and it says, those who are far away will come and help to build the temple of the Lord. And you will know the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. This will happen if you diligently obey the Lord your God. All right. So this is really cool. Really cool. God says, hey, you do what you're supposed to do, and I'm going to come in and help, right? So remember, do today what you're called to do and trust God for the rest of tomorrow. God says, just start building again. Start building. Just be obedient. Start building. And then I will take care of the rest. I'll send you people. I'll send you supplies. I will do all of these things. We have to be faithful to show up and do our part. The story that it reminds me of is, I don't know how long you guys have been here, but when Pastor Jay showed up a little over 3 years ago, he tells this story to me, and he says, Casey, I showed up to church on the hill, and I'm super excited. And we sit down to look at the finances, and I go, oh, whew, we're on a shoestring budget around here. And then he starts looking around, he goes, oh, we need a new water line. Oh, we need to do this. Oh, we need to do that. And all of a sudden, all these things start popping up, and Jay's like, oh, man, what are we going to do? What did I get myself into a little bit? Not that he ever felt that way, but just the thought popped in there, okay? Sorry, Pastor Jay. Not trying to sell you out there. But the thoughts popped into his head is, what are we going to do, right? Those are real problems. But what Pastor Jay did is showed up. He was faithful to preach the word, to serve the people of this church, to give 120% of everything he did. You know what the crazy part is? Jay was asked to give a total of everything that needed to be fixed, like ASAP around here, to a nonprofit. And he went to the nonprofit and he said, hey, guys, you asked this guy to give you a total. I'm telling you, it's going to be around $400,000. We got a water line, we got this, and he starts listing off all these things and how important they were for us to be able to function as a church. And he says, we need these things. And they said, okay, let us pray about it. They come back to Pastor Jay and they said, we're going to do all of it. We're going to write you a check. Powerful, powerful if you're willing to show up and do what God has called you to do. Be be faithful. Sometimes it's going to be scary. It's not always going to be easy, but he's going to call you to do things that are outside of your power, so you have to trust him. You have to lean into him for protection and provision. And we're going to jump over into the next section of Zechariah 7:4 and see what God's doing here. It kind of ties in a little bit here, and it says, I might have gave you the wrong verses, guys, so I'm just going to read it. I probably gave you the wrong verses. I think I jumped ahead there. Zechariah 4-6 says, "Then the word of the Lord Almighty came to me. Ask all the people of the land and the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th months for the past 70 years, was it really for me that you fasted?" God being me, that you guys fasted, the exiles. "When you were eating and drinking, were you not just feasting for yourselves?" I want to open up with this little section and say, maybe you're not a believer. Maybe you're getting a free lunch out of showing up today. Those are always kind of cool opportunities. Your friend said, "Hey, I'll buy you lunch if you come to church with me." And then you got surprised because you thought Pastor Jay was going to be here, and I'm here, and I'm much shorter and much less funny. But you're going to get a free lunch out of it, so that's awesome. Or maybe you're a truth seeker. Maybe you're just trying to figure out what this God thing is all about. And hey, maybe you're a longtime follower with Christ. Here's one thing that I'll tell you to be true that I've found in my walk with God, is that God will not let you stay where you are. He will call you, draw you, and drag you into holiness. Absolutely. And that sounds scary, right? It sounds a little scary. What do you mean he's going to drag me into holiness? And here's what I'm going to tell you. Holiness means to be set apart. It means that if you're going to be holy, when God pulls you out of this world and puts you into his holiness, that you're going to look nothing like the world anymore. Right? And so he's going to pull you out of there, look over here and go, we missed a spot. Let's bring it back over here. Shake him around a little bit and bring him back over. Not quite right yet. Come over here, turn him upside down, grab by his ankles and shake him a little more. Right? So God's going to do what he has to get the world out of us and to have us look more like him. Because God is holy. In order for us to be with him, we have to be holy. And so God is going to do this to us. Great little video. It's the best, probably some of the best 10 minutes you will spend of your life if you watch Chisel by the Skit Guys on YouTube. Totally powerful, beautiful video of how much God loves you and how God will work in your life. And it will be the best 10 minutes of your life, I promise. Otherwise, you can have a free donut when you come to church next week, okay? But the truth is if we're going to walk with God, we have to be like God. We can't continue to be our old selves and walk with God. That's what the exiles kept doing. They said, we're just going to kind of do our own thing here, God. Okay, thank you. Okay, we paid our sacrifice, but we're going to keep doing our things. And God's like, you better straighten out. You better straighten out or I'm coming. Because you see, God doesn't save us just to keep us from going to hell. God wasn't like, those guys need saving. There's a fire. Let's go run in and grab them, right? But God saves us to bring us into relationship with him, for us to be like his son, to be more like him. That's what you're signing up for. So guess what? If you're a believer, you're going to become a believer. Just know there's going to be some painful moments that are coming when you get confronted with your sin, the things you're not supposed to be looking at, the words you're not supposed to be saying, the way that you treat people that you shouldn't be treating people. And you see, when we're coming back here to Zechariah, God is calling them out and saying, hey guys, so I know you were doing these things in exile, but was that for you? Were you just saving face with your friends that you were good believers? Or are you really doing that because you love God? Do you do it because you love me? Did you fast because you wanted to be close to me? Did you celebrate because of my goodness, even though you're in exile? He challenges them, right? He sees the unholiness in them, and he pulls them out, and he starts shaking them to see what's going to fall off. And then we're going to jump into Zechariah 9, 7 through 10. Hopefully that one I get right. I might have mixed the two, so we might not have it right. Oh, yoo-hoo. All right. Zechariah 9, 7 through 10. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Administer true justice, show mercy, and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. You see, when God draws us into relationship, he calls us to obedience, not for us to be good little robots, but he calls us into obedience for transformation. You see, when we start to follow the ways of God and we start to do those things because we love him, something in us changes. I'll never forget one of my elders from my first church, Kirk Wilson. Our pastor threw him under the bus and said, well, you know, Kirk's one of our biggest givers here at the church. And Kirk's like, dude, what are you doing? And so he's like, Kirk, I'm just saying that because I want people to know how you got there. Can you tell them how you got there? And Kirk said, well, guys, first I just started out giving my tithe. Started giving my tithe and just trying to be obedient. I'm trying to be a good baby Christian. I'm being obedient. And then something happened and God started blessing me. And I was so overwhelmed with God's blessing that I just started to give more. And as I gave more, God blessed me more. And I've gotten to this place where I try to be an open-handed giver because I feel the love of God every time I give. And I'm not saying that because I'm like, hey guys, give more money to Church on the Hill. But what I'm saying is that if you're faithful in love to be obedient to God, he will grow you in ways that you can't grow without him. And he'll grow you into the image of his son. And so I see this affirmed in the New Testament with Jesus. Here's what he says, and this is not going to be on the board, the next three verses. But this is what he says in Luke 14:15. If you love me, keep my commands. He's telling his disciples, if you love me, then you'll do what I've asked of you. That's what relationship means. You know, your kids, take out the trash. I don't want to do it. Well, do it because you love me. Or is it do it because I'm going to give you a whooping, right? Right. But we do it because we love you. That's, the nature of the relationship between me and my wife, right? Say, hey, Casey, can you do this for me? And I'm like, yeah, of course, I love you. Of course I'll do that for you. Hey, can you run to the store and get me this from the store? Absolutely. I do it because I love her, and I want her to know how much I love her, right? And that's the nature of a good relationship, is things are done out of love. The next one is Matthew 10:42. If anyone gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, who is my disciple, truly I tell you that this person will certainly not lose their reward. Jesus says, it's the right thing to do the right thing. It's the right thing. You won't lose your reward. Just do it. Do what I've called you to do. And then James 2:14 through 17 says, what is it, my brothers and sisters, or what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and food daily food. If one of you says to them, go and keep peace and keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself is not if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Jesus says you can't be in a relationship with me and good not come out of you. It's impossible. One of the stories that I think of is my good friend and longtime worship pastor that I worked at my first church, Jason. He's Pastor Jason too. But he said that he grew up in Pentecostal church, and so they were very energetic Christians. I love that. And so he used to do revivals. He would go around, and he's an amazing singer. Man has a beautiful voice. And so he was leading worship at these revivals, and he sat down to listen to one of the messages one time, and he's sitting there in the message, and he's been a part of the church for 7 or 8 years now. He started when he was in junior high, and he's an adult now. And the pastor starts preaching, and he starts talking about the fruits of the Spirit. And he says, if you're a believer, then you will have kindness, patience, gentleness, and all these things. And my buddy's going, I don't have any of those things. And the pastor's like, well, if you don't have any of those things, then you're not saved. You don't know Jesus. And he's like, I don't know Jesus. And so he went up at the altar call and gave his life to Christ. And the comedy show begins after that as he runs home to tell all of his family and friends that he just got saved for the first time. And they're like, what are you talking about? You've been saved this whole time. But he didn't have a real relationship with God. And from that day, his life just exploded. He toured collecting money for widows and orphans with a ministry all across the United States. He led people in worship, and he's one of the most faithful believers I know. You can't have a relationship with Jesus and not be changed. You can't. And so I'm going to add an amendment to my pastor's statement. And it says, if rules without relationship breeds rebellion, then rules with relationship breeds transformation. And so God adds a new layer to this picture, is that obedience to him out of love will transform us to be like him. So I get to add a little spoiler alert to our message. The exilees, they didn't make it. As some of us will know for a little bit of history buffs. So we're working at about 540 BC. 520. See, this whole BC thing confuses me that we go backwards in years. So they were exiled in 540, and they're in 520. Sorry about that for the confusion there. And so in 520 BC, they're getting confronted by God, and about 480 years later, this really powerful country comes in called the Roman Empire. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They come in and take control of the Israelites, and they take power. And the Israelites didn't follow through with what God had called them to do. And so I say that to hopefully frame up where God's going with this next section. And so if you will jump with me to Zechariah 9:9, I think we have it up there. And it says, rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Has anybody heard this verse before? Not in the Old Testament. Has anybody heard it? I see a few hands. Woo. So this verse is actually going to take place in real life 550 years later. Zechariah was told by God to say this, and it comes true 550 years later in about 30-ish AD. Matthew 21, 2 through 5, I'm going to read that for you. It's not on the board. It says, say to them, go to a village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone asks anything of you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. So disciples were called to go grab a donkey that they didn't own, they didn't know. And he says, hey, guess what? If something happens, just tell them I need it. And they go, okay, we'll go steal a donkey for you, Jesus. No problem. So they go to steal the donkey, and they go to get it, and the guy doesn't have a problem with them taking it. He's like, yeah, it's for Jesus, you got it. And again, if we're faithful to do what God's called us to do, he will show up in the future for us, take care of it. And so they do this, and this was all took place to fulfill what was spoken. Say to your daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. 550 years later, these words ring true. Now, chance? I think you have a better chance of winning the lottery, getting struck by lightning, and getting eaten by a shark in the same day, right? Better chances of that than this being a chance, okay? But why do we know that this isn't a chance? Because we know the character of God. The character of God is that he sees all things for all time. God exists outside of time. That's how he knows what's going to happen. That's why he knows he wins. That's why he knows all the things that he knows, and he saw this was going to happen, and he told Zechariah, have the people watch for this. Watch for this. I'm going to be doing something. Pay attention. Wake up. Pay attention. I'm going to announce my king of my kingdom. He's going to ride on a donkey. He's going to be coming in on a donkey. When this happens, you know to be ready. Be ready. So the next layer of our painting is that he's telling us a new kingdom is coming. You see, Jesus, sometimes we have a hard time wrapping our minds around Old and New Testament. You know, sometimes we think, oh, well, Jesus in the New Testament came to wipe out the Old Testament. God needed a second chance, right? Sometimes we feel that way, but the truth and the reality is that Jesus came to fulfill the Old Testament. And fulfill just means to complete it. It's like if you're looking at a test. I don't know, maybe this was you. This was me a lot in high school. You're looking at a test, and you're going down the test, and you're like, don't know that answer, don't know that answer. Plankton is what part of family, species, kingdom, origin, right? You're going down the test, and the only thing you got right is your name. And you're like, oh, this is bad. And then all of a sudden, here comes Jesus. He's like, Casey. And he fills out the whole test 100%. That's kind of the picture of the fulfillment of what it is. And so Jesus, in Matthew 5:17-19, Jesus announces, I didn't come to wipe away the Old Testament. It is 100,000,000,000% relative, okay? He says it is 100% relative. I'm just letting you know I've come, and by the time I leave this earth, everything that was supposed to have been done, I'm going to do. I'm going to complete everything. I'm going to honor every law. Everything our Father has called me to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to complete it. I'm going to be unlike anything you've ever seen before. And then we get to our last verse here, Zechariah 12:10-7. Oh. Okay, sorry guys. 12:10-11. That was, all right. And it says this, and I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one who mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one who grieves for a firstborn son. If the band wants to start making their way back up here, I'll start tying this all in a little bit of a knot here. Maybe this sounds familiar to you. Maybe this kind of like, oh, that got an itch here. It's like you got that, it's right on the tip of your tongue maybe. You're like, that sounds familiar. What's Zechariah talking about? I kind of want to know what it is. And what he's talking about is, I'm going to give you the answer, right? I'm going to give you the answer here to this one. And it's John 19:34-37. Here's what John says. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you may also believe. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. And another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. 550 years earlier, Zechariah told the people, watch out, a perfect sacrifice is coming, one that's going to cover all sins. It's coming. God has a master plan, right? And so when we talk about Zechariah and not losing this forest for the trees, right? There's so much, such a beautiful text. I think if we were to like break down and preach this, it would take 14 weeks. So me doing this little sermon is like not doing any justice to these scriptures. But I want to say, if we just kind of peek into what God's doing through Zechariah, is he's saying, I'm building something new. You guys missed it. I'm going to be adding on to what I had done. I'm expanding upon what you know, and I'm going to fulfill everything. And I'm going to make something new. And it's going to be on the shoulders of my son, Jesus Christ. So, I just want to say, take time to read Zechariah. You're going to be confused. Fair warning. There's some really weird stuff in there. Visions are always a little tricky. Make sure to get some commentaries or call for help from an experienced Bible friend. But it's worth reading because it basically foreshadows the greatest thing that will ever happen in human history. A Savior who took a bunch of people who wanted nothing to do with him and die for them and give them eternal life. And so I just want to encapsulate that with what we first talked about a people who were missing out on the fact that they weren't doing what God was calling them to do, right? God's like, hey, you're supposed to be building my temple, but you're building houses. You're not doing what I've asked you to do. Come back to me. I love you. I've got a plan for you. And I don't know where any of you are at today. I don't know where you're at with Jesus. But if you think you have tomorrow to make it right with him, you don't. My dad thought he was going to live to be 90 because every one of his siblings and family members lived to 90. Mijo, you got longevity in your blood. You're going to live to 90. And my dad made it to 72. He was banking on 20 more years of life. He didn't get it. And for all of us, we don't know if we have tomorrow. And I don't want to guilt anybody, because God's not going to guilt you. But he's just saying, if you want forgiveness, you want a relationship, you want blessings, I'm here. I love you. I don't care what you've done. I don't care where you've been. I've known worse. I've saved better. Or saved worse. I've saved better. And so I'm going to pray, and I'm going to let the worship team do their thing. Heavenly Father God, I don't know where anybody's at in this room, but if they're feeling like maybe today's the day they need to trust you for the first time, or maybe they need to stop messing around and get on track with you, just have them put their hand in the air, God, so I can just pray for them, God. Okay. Heavenly Father God, I just pray for these individuals that you would continue to put their call in their life, that you are a loving God who loves them and who wants nothing but the best for them, to not just save them from hell and damnation, but to have a relationship with you. And if that's you today, then pray this prayer with me. Heavenly Father God, I've messed up. I've sinned. I've fallen short of these things that we're talking about here. I don't know what it means 100%, but I do know that I need your help. I need your forgiveness. So please forgive me for my sins. Bring me into relationship with you. Teach me what it means to take on your protection, to be obedient to you, and to be transformed in the image of your Son. Help me to walk in your ways, Jesus. Amen.